In the quiet of our house, a place that once felt so familiar, I found myself grappling with shadows. The echo of the garbage disposal's growl haunts me, a sound that had become all too frequent in the nights leading up to her disappearance. The plumber's revelation had left a chill that no amount of rational thinking could dispel. How could a device that was essentially non-functional behave with such ferocity, with such appetite? The days following were a blur, punctuated by visits from the police, the whispers of neighbors, and the silence of the house that seemed to mock me with its secrets. My wife's sudden absence had turned my life into a labyrinth of questions with no exit in sight. One evening, driven by a mix of desperation and longing for answers, I returned to the kitchen, to that sink that had become the epicenter of my nightmares. The empty disposal sat there, a gaping maw that seemed to sneer at my plight. In a moment of reckless determination, I decided to dismantle it further, to tear apart every piece until I uncovered its secrets. Tools in hand, I worked with a fervor, removing screws, peeling back pipes, tracing the pathway that had supposedly swallowed my wife's offerings to whatever resided within. Yet, with each layer stripped away, the mystery only deepened. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that could explain the events that had transpired. Exhausted and defeated, I slumped to the floor, my gaze falling upon the drain once more. That's when I noticed it, a slight, almost imperceptible vibration beneath the sink. It was faint, but unmistakably there, pulsing like a heartbeat. I leaned in closer, my ear inches from the metal, and that's when I heard it. A soft, whispering voice, barely a breath, calling my name. Startled, I recoiled, my mind racing to rationalize what I had just experienced. But the voice came again, clearer this time, imbued with a familiar warmth that sent shivers down my spine. It was her voice, my wife's voice, speaking to me from the darkness of the drain. "Help me," she whispered. The words hung in the air, a plea that tethered me to the spot, torn between fear and the desperate hope that I could still save her. My heart pounded against my rib cage as I realized the truth might be stranger and more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. Determined to confront whatever lay beneath, I prepared to dismantle the kitchen floor itself, to tear into the foundation of our home if necessary. But as I set to work, the first strike of my hammer against the tile was met with resistance, not from the floor, but from an unseen force that suddenly filled the room with a chilling gust of wind, extinguishing every light in the house. In the darkness, her voice came again, not from the drain this time, but from all around me, a sorrowful lament that spoke of betrayal, of a hunger that had grown beyond her control, of a darkness that had been awakened not by her, but through her. As I groped in the dark for my tools, for any source of light, the ground beneath me began to tremble, and the air grew thick with a presence I could not see but felt enveloping me, drawing me closer to the abyss that had claimed her. And then, from the shadows, emerged the faintest glimmer of light, not enough to see by, but enough to guide me. I followed it, each step a leap of faith, into the depths of a mystery that I could no longer deny or escape. The story continues, the line between reality and nightmare blurring as I delve deeper into the enigma of the garbage disposal, the disappearance of my wife, and the entity that lurks in the darkness, waiting. The glimmer of light led me not away from the kitchen, but deeper into its heart, towards the pantry, a space I had traversed countless times without thought. Now it seemed as if it were a portal, the light emanating from behind the rows of canned goods and boxed meals, casting long, quivering shadows against the walls. As I moved cans aside, the light grew stronger, revealing a crack in the wall I had never noticed before, a crack that pulsed with a soft, ethereal glow. My hands, guided by a mix of fear and determination, found the edges of this anomaly, pushing against the reality of my own home to reveal a hidden chamber beyond. The chamber was small, barely wide enough to step into, and filled with an air so thick it seemed to cling to my skin. The light, now clearly visible, emanated from a small, intricately carved stone set into the far wall. It was unlike anything I had seen, pulsing with a life of its own, its glow casting dancing patterns across the surfaces of the chamber. It was here in the silence of this hidden space that her voice came to me again, stronger, more desperate. "Release me," it pleaded, echoing off the stone walls. I reached out towards the stone, the source of the light, and as my fingers brushed its surface, a rush of images flooded my mind. Scenes of my wife, not as I knew her, but as something else, something bound to the stone, to the house, and to the entity that had begun to stir within its depths. The entity, a consciousness as old as time itself, had been dormant beneath our home, feeding off the remnants of lives long past until my wife, in her sleepless wanderings, had somehow awakened it. It had promised her companionship in her loneliest hours, whispered secrets of the universe into her eager ears, and in return, it had asked for sustenance. But as it grew stronger, so did its demands, until she realized the horror of what she had unleashed. In her attempt to appease it, to protect me, she had become its prisoner, bound to the entity as its conduit to the world above. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air. My wife, the woman I loved, had been consumed by her own good intentions, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. I pulled my hand away from the stone, the connection severed, but the determination within me ignited. I would not leave her to this fate. The entity, sensing my resolve, stirred, its presence enveloping the chamber in a darkness that threatened to suffocate me. But within that darkness, I found my resolve. I spoke, not with words, but with the force of my will, challenging the entity, demanding my wife's release. The chamber trembled, the air vibrated with the power of unseen forces colliding, and then, as quickly as it had begun, the darkness receded. The light from the stone flickered and then stabilized, its glow now warm, inviting. And there, in the center of the chamber, stood my wife, as real and solid as the day we had met, but changed, marked by her journey through the darkness. We embraced, a reunion not of this world, but of two souls who had traversed the unthinkable. Yet even as we held each other, we knew our journey was far from over. The entity, though quieted, was not defeated, and the crack in the wall, now sealed, was only one of many. Our home, our sanctuary, had become a battleground, a place where the veil between worlds had thinned, and we stood at its heart, the only ones who could mend the breach. As we stepped out of the chamber, back into the familiarity of our kitchen, we knew that our lives could never return to the simplicity of before. We were changed, bound together not just by love, but by the shared purpose of facing the darkness that lurked beneath our feet. The story continues, a tale of love and sacrifice, of battles fought in the shadows, and of the light that guides us through the darkest of nights. In the days that followed, an eerie calm settled over our house, a silence that was anything but peaceful. It was the quiet of a breath held too long, of the sea withdrawing before the tsunami strikes. We knew the entity had not been vanquished, merely bided its time, gathering its strength from the shadows where it lurked. Each night, as darkness enveloped our home, we could feel its presence, a malevolent watchfulness that seeped through the cracks in the walls, the spaces beneath the doors. It was learning, adapting, and waiting for the moment to strike. We fortified our home as best we could, symbols of protection etched into the thresholds, salt lines guarding the entrances, and every conceivable precaution taken to ward off the unseen. But with each passing night, the barrier between our world and the entity's realm thinned, eroded by its relentless assault. One night, under a moon veiled by clouds, the silence broke. It began with a sound, soft and wet, like the squelching of mud underfoot, emanating from the kitchen. We approached, each step heavy with dread, to find the sink filled with a darkness so absolute, it seemed to swallow the light. The air grew cold, a chill that clawed at our flesh, as the darkness began to rise, coalescing into a form that was both shapeless and terrifyingly precise. It was the entity, manifesting not as we had seen it before, but as a horror born of the deepest shadows, a nightmare-given form. It spoke, its voice a cacophony of whispers that filled our minds, words that promised despair and suffering. "You cannot bind me," it hissed. "I am eternal, as old as fear itself." We stood our ground, though every instinct screamed to flee. We had prepared for this, a ritual that would seal the entity away, using the very connection it had forged with my wife as the conduit. It was a desperate plan, one that required her to touch the entity, to bridge the physical and ethereal with her own being. With trembling hands, she reached towards the darkness, her touch an act of both bravery and sacrifice. The moment they connected, a blinding light erupted, engulfing the room, the house, and everything within it. The light receded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving an emptiness in its wake. The entity was gone, banished back to the depths from which it had come. But so too was my wife. Where she had stood, there was nothing but a lingering warmth in the air, a testament to her presence. I searched for her, in this realm and beyond, through every crack and crevice that might hide a doorway to where she might have gone. But she was lost to me, her sacrifice a barrier that held the darkness at bay, but at a cost too great to bear. The house stood silent, a shell of the home we had shared, its walls now a prison to my grief. I could not stay, not with every corner, every shadow whispering her name, a constant reminder of the price paid. So I left, the house abandoned, left to the mercy of time and nature. But the story does not end at the edge of our property, nor with the closing of a door. It continues in the whispers of the wind, in the stories told in hushed tones about the house that stands alone, where darkness dwells in the heart of its kitchen, waiting for the brave or the foolish to awaken it once more. And somewhere, in a place beyond the reach of light, she waits too, my wife, my love, guarding the line between worlds. Her sacrifice a beacon in the darkness, a reminder of the cost of facing the unseen horrors that lurk just out of sight, waiting for their moment to emerge. So ends the tale, a story of love, loss, and the darkness that dwells within us all. Thank you for listening to my channel.